Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review Psionics Expanded Advanced Psionics Guide. This is from Dreamscarred Press and from the same people that did Psionics Unleashed, the Pathfinder version of the Psionics rules. And I had nothing but positive things to say about that book, and this is the follow-up volume. So, we start out with discussions of the races that have been presented in Psionics Unleashed. The Blues, the Dromites, Dugar, Elan, Half-Giants, Maenids, Ophidians, and Zephs. And how those races interact with the new classes and with alternative racial options for both traditional and classes and things like that. For example, racial traits, you trade one thing for another. The concept that was used in the Advanced Player's Guide from Pathfinder. They also talk about the Dwarven, the Dwarven, right? I'm looking at the word dwarf. The core races, dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, half-orcs, halflings, and humans, and how they interact with these new classes and some new psionic options available there for those classes. It was a solid chapter. It didn't thrill me simply because I'm like, yeah, okay, this is kind of cool. I moved on because I was really interested in their take on the new classes and the additional material that had been written for them and for things that were from Psionics Unleashed. Now we have the classes that this is being presented. You have the Aegis, the Cryptic, the Dread, the Marksman, the Tactician, and the Vitalist. Now, the Aegis, to me, is the most interesting one here. You are taking ectoplasmic energy and creating armor. Now, you can create light, medium, or heavy armors, and depending on what type of armor you have, it gives you different abilities based on those armor types. Obviously, light armor is going to be faster and more dodgy-based. Medium armor is going to be a midpoint, and the heavy armor is going to be where you're tanking. You are a juggernaut. And there's a lot of customization in this class. A lot of abilities to play with. There are options galore. You get points to spend, and you can spend them like the way they handle the Summoner, essentially, in Pathfinder. And some of these abilities were very cool. For example, you can bump up your size. So a medium person could then become large, and that can go up to huge. And the cover image here shows a goblin inside a suit of armor, which is medium size. And he looks very happy about the situation now, doesn't he? He's finally the same size as the human beings. That is a cool concept. I really enjoyed this class. I thought it was well presented. Lots of options to play with. You could tinker with this for a long time. So that people who really like those kind of little tinkery bits, they're going to like the Aegis. Next we had the Cryptic. And the Cryptic is all about understanding patterns. Whether they're puzzles or traps or sigils. It's all about patterns. And they can actually reach out and disrupt the patterns that are other people. And this is a good stand-in for a warlock. They disrupt the other patterns of other individuals with a ranged touch attack. Sounds a whole lot like an Eldritch Blast now, doesn't it? Now, this is heavily trap-based because they are viewing traps as patterns. Your ability to turn them off, turn them back on, create them, disable them, and use them to your advantage. I've never been a big trap fan. I'll have to freely admit that. I don't remember any person in any of my games ever setting a trap. And I used them as a GM, but they're all static set pieces. I very rarely set up in combat, or if someone was being chased and they set one up, to catch somebody. So traps were never a big role in my games. But if you like traps, this is the class for you. And I do like how they handled this disrupt pattern ability, the ranged touch attack, and of course the other options that you can play with in the book, dealing with traps and with their understanding of patterns. It was quite well done. Next we have the Dread, and the Dread is all about fear, about reaching into someone and hitting that little button that scares them out of their mind about using psionics in the scariest possible way. So if you want to play a character that's all about turning your opponent into a gibbering mass of tears and phlegm on the ground, this is the class for you. It was interesting. I'm reading this, and there's like no way I can't separate this from like Lovecraftian views of the universe. It just seems to me that you're very much trying to reach into someone's mind and open up their psychic eye, if you will, to see things as they are. You're going to show you the horror of reality. It really did, to me, come off as a very Lovecraftian view of the things of the world, and I thought it was very cool. Next, you have the Marksman. Now, this is interesting because this is using psychic abilities to enhance mundane ranged weapons. That's interesting. And while the Psychic Warrior, to some extent, has that shtick if you want to, this is explicitly designed for the character that wants to play a ranged warrior. And you can use crossbows, you could use crossbows and bows, or thrown weapons, and they even make us, there's an option here if you want to use firearms. And I thought that was quite well done. The whole idea of psychically enhancing ranged weapons as a skill, I thought that was kind of cool. And this does a good job of presenting that. Next we have the Tactician. The Tactician was, at first glance, okay, the person's a tactician, what's he do? He becomes a living, breathing cell tower. He psychically connects his entire team, at first at a fairly low range. I think it's medium range is initially, so tactical. Right? He can see the people around him, and he can help coordinate them in combat. Okay, that's nice. As power increases, the range of his abilities increase. Eventually, he's able to reach out to his entire network, and that's what it's called, on the entire same plane, and eventually through the entire multiverse. This is cool. This allows for coordination of tactics and efforts on an unheard of scale. And I'm reading this and I'm going, I don't actually think well in these kind of terms, but I know people who do. And there are people who are going to think about, get their hands on this class, and they are going to do horrible, horrible things to other GM's campaigns, man. Because they are going to be able to use this to their advantage. And a good GM can use it against his players. So a tactician leading a group, or at least part of a group, just as the connection, as the hub, as the communication center, is going to be a complete game changer in my book. Very interesting class. And next we have the Vitalist. And the Vitalist is all about the ability to help and heal other people, themselves and other people. And they have a network of their own, and this network is all about being in contact with people and being able to not only heal them and help them stay healthy, but to share healing within that network. So as they gain power, they would be able to swap healing abilities from one person to another. So say that I am the Vitalist, and one of my party members quaffs a potion of healing. I would be able to transfer some or all of that healing to someone else in the group, or share it amongst the entire group equally. That's very cool. And of course you can do this healing people, like regeneration and even resurrection, things like that. There's a lot of options in here. If you've been looking for a psychic healer, and you wanted to run a campaign and you didn't like the idea of using divine magic because those are the only people that can do healing, well, those are not the only people that can do healing anymore, folks. The Vitalist has you covered. Did a great job. Then they're talking about advanced classes, which is about how to larger archetypal options. And what they're doing here is they're offering you major archetypes. Some of these are major archetypal differences, okay, that allow you to blend different classes a little bit and new options while sticking with your core class so you don't lose the bonus you get from sticking with your core class. For example, under the Soul Knife, there's now this Soul Dart ability, which you fire a psychic dart at people, and you can fire the psychic dart as many times as you have attacks. So all your iterative attack, I can't say that word. All your attacks after your +6 BAB will work. So you become this little machine gun firing in all directions when you're at high levels. Very well done. And there's options for all of the classes presented both in the first Psionics Unleashed and in Psionics Expanded. They also talk about some options for fighters, monks, and rogues, allowing you to have psychic options for those classes, and some awesome psychic monk options in here. You could play a really cool psychic monk. In fact, I was so impressed by the psychic monk abilities in this. I'm thinking like, wow, why wouldn't you want to just do psychic monks all the time? They just are cool in my book. And there's a whole section on feats, some advanced rules dealing with talents, traits, and power displays. There's the new psionic powers that the book introduces. Then they get into prestige classes. For example, the Metaforge, which is about changing yourself and becoming more powerful by internalizing your abilities to essentially mutate yourself. There's also a version of the Aegis where instead of putting your ectoplasmic abilities into your armor, you put them into your body and you essentially mutate yourself. Now, there's a lot of advantages in combat for that, and the Metaforge as well. You essentially building powers into yourself. But it makes me wonder, okay, cool, you're a combat monster with 4 tentacles, and you've got eyes on stalks, and you've got claws and fangs. Awesome. Where are you going to go? What town is going to let you in? What royal court is going to let you speak? You will be lucky if they let you stay in the stable with the horses. It's some really interesting ideas, but I think that the social ramifications are crippling. So, it's up to the player, I guess. But you're going to have to be willing to live with the consequences. Mystic Archer, the Psi Crystal Imprinter, about creating Psi Crystals, of course. The Soul Archer, which is how to use your soul knife as an archery feat, as opposed to using the Soul Dart, which is a different feature. So lots of soul knife options in here. And the Telekinetic Weapon Master. That was cool. Using telekinetically using weapons around you as would very much, the Force is with you kind of thing. Awesome. Then there's a section on psionic items. Armor, weapons, crystal focus items, and universal items. So, is this a good follow-up to Psionics Unleashed? Yes, it is. I don't think it's as good as Psionics Unleashed, but I think it is a very solid supplement to it, and if you liked Psionics Unleashed, you were going to like Psionics Expanded. This book doesn't stand on its own. You really need the other book to work with, for it to work with. And I guess in some ways, I think that kind of weakens it a little bit in some manners. But if you combine this with Psionics Unleashed, you are definitely going to be able to play with an incredible array of psychic abilities. This has got you covered for Psionics and Pathfinder for years to come. These 2 books, you will have so many options. You will be able to do so many things. You will be able to run a complete Psionics game with no arcane and no divine magic whatsoever. And I love that idea. Really take it out of the traditional fantasy realm and put it into a completely different realm. You could run Athos without any arcane or divine magic. And to my mind, Athos is a psionic world that should be run that way. That's the way it should have always been run. But the old psionic rules simply couldn't support it. Now, the psionic rules can. So, if you are a fan of Psionics Unleashed, go get this book. Don't even hesitate. Stop watching. Go. Get it. It's worth your time and money and effort of reading it. Highly recommended.